Good morning. I'd like to call to order this work session of the Southampton Town Board on this 22nd day of October 2020. Please rise if you're able and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Supervisor Schneiderman?
Here.
Councilwoman Lodstad?
Here.
Councilman Martell?
Here.
Councilman Bouvier?
Here.
Councilman Scivone?
Here.
All right, great. Let's get started. If you're in the audience, I ask that you be seated. We're going to start with the proposed battery code. We're going to speak with Janice Shearer, our Town Planning and Development Administrator, and Michelangelo Lieberman, our Town Planner. And I know there's some people maybe in the audience who are also concerned about this. All right. Janice, do you want to introduce this topic?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor, members of the board. Thanks for having us this morning. I'm here because if you had asked me in January when I took this position what 2020 would be all about pre-COVID, I would have said it's about infrastructure planning, because really it is. We're at that crossroads where we need to think about capacity planning. Do we have the infrastructure we need to keep moving forward? And then you have your renewable energy goals that you've set, and they're ambitious goals. So I would have said, and actually COVID showed us that it really is about, putting the systems and infrastructure in place, even in terms of our digital world, cell towers. And now this conversation is really about energy and how that's going to work. And we have our chair of our energy committee, Lynn Arthur, here about, and as you know, we're making strides toward CCA. And one big piece of that puzzle is batteries. And it's finally become a point in time where batteries are a viable business. There's something, not only just the average homeowner now could put a battery in their home and coupled with their solar power, produce power and save it in a battery and use it during those peak times to bring down our load. But people can use this as a business proposition, where an actual use in the code, which has not been identified, is battery storage. So we went to, and there's RFPs and things like that now, where NYSERDA LIPA, PSEG, are recognizing the need to store the energy produced by the grid now more than ever, to bring down our costs. So they're putting out sort of RFPs for people to be able to put batteries in various locations near grid infrastructure, substations. And we don't have a code we don't have anything that addresses this. So this whole thing is about deploying a code, and NYSERDA had a really nice model code. So Mike has done a ton of work in this regard, where he's talked to everyone in NYSERDA. They gave us a model code, and you can actually structure the code in tiers. So you know that it's different when it's just a person who wants to put a battery in their basement is not the same thing as someone who wants to put shipping containers on a parcel with many, many batteries. So there's those tiers identify that in this draft code, where you have, in the first instance, it's more about that small scale thing. Then it could be someone putting them in like a shed, or maybe your business, or a supermarket even. We've talked about fuel cells for this purpose, but a high user could potentially couple their use with a battery. So that's a different tier. That's more of a tier 2. And then this tier 3 notion is you're a primary use, your goal, your business is to produce and store energy. It may be coupled with a solar thing, which we'll come back to another day, because we like to, figure out a solar code as well. So without too much time, Mike can go over the specifics of the code, and we have a lot of, all the things we've done to date that we could talk about to address this issue. But, it's really just battery storage is another tool in our toolbox to be able to manage our energy use I think that's really the point. And creating a code that allows this infrastructure in various locations throughout the town. You know, we're starting out with, and we could talk through, where would this be allowed? Is this allowed in residential zones? Can we put it in, is it only in a commercial industrial thing? It's a quiet battery thing in a shipping container. Is it going to bother anybody? Because that's what zoning's all about, right? Health, safety, and public welfare. So we want to make sure it's safe, there's no fire problems, and it's not going to bother anybody. And it's fair. It's fairly benign use. So with that, I'm going to have you ask questions, but also have Mike kind of go through the actual meat of the code when you're ready as well.
So let me start first with, how are they currently regulated in the code? As utilities?
Not at all.
You'd come in under, like if you wanted to build a power plant, it would be.
They're not.
There's no code.
There's no code at all? They're not treated as utilities?
No.
This would go in as accessory use.
Well, the code identifies, in
But
some
it-
instances, it could be a primary use, when it's
And-
that high tier thing.
Okay.
So, where are are there utilities in the code? Like if you wanted to build
There
a
is
power
a
station?
utility code, and we've had the interpretation that it's not necessarily a utility,
Because it doesn't,
because it's
Produce
a,
energy.
yes.
it's only a
It's a storage.
facility, so.
And we like the idea that we don't just capture it under utility with no oversight. We really want to be able to say, okay, as long as it's this, and you screen it, and you put this fence around it, and whereas utilities are like,
So the benefit, besides the fact that innovation is creating much more efficient batteries, I guess there's a number of benefits to battery storage, right? So if you're depending on offshore wind or solar, you can store energy at times when you might not be producing energy, right?
that's right. And, the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow, but when it does, you can capture it, store it, and then
You
rely
can,
on that.
I guess, store energy when energy is available, so that at peak demand times, when we just don't have enough electricity, you can then release it.
Exactly.
So you're basically storing it when it's available and releasing it when there's little available.
And
So-
this is a market now, right?
And that will take the pressure off the infrastructure to meet that highest peak demand, which they have to build the infrastructure to. So that could help us not get more power plants, more, power lines. That can be, visual problems. All right. And then I guess you can also buy the power when it's cheaper too, at night, and release it during the day, so that as a business model,
Right. And you're
you-
selling that power back and you're making that
you're
differential
making
in
that
a
margin,
profit.
so
Yeah.
Right.
And it also enhances our ability to look seriously at producing power locally in local ways, either through solar, wind, tidal, or otherwise,
Yeah.
that we're able to store that energy and use it.
I'm not sure people are aware that there's different prices based on the hour of the day for utilities, so
Right, so if you
The
run your
kilowatt
dishwasher at 12
costs-
PM or 7 PM, it's a totally different price for that.
right. And
Yeah.
it's much cheaper in the middle of the night to use electricity than it is at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Or dinner time and those times, right, Lynn?
Yeah.
A penny a kilowatt hour difference, Lynn is saying from the audience.
Yeah, so
And
I
Lynn
don't
might
know
be
what
the
that
perfect person
translates
to talk to
but-
about that, but
All right, and can I ask you about, before we get into the details of the code, the downsides? You had mentioned public safety, so battery storage, I mean, these are, I guess they're lithium ion or some chemical battery. Are there, potential for fires? Are there potential for chemical leaks? Is there ugly infrastructure that's associated with this in terms of tying it into the grid? Are there community impacts? And then, what exactly are you proposing? I see a map with some circles. Is this going to be something that's allowable in residential areas or only more industrial areas?
well, it's tiered, right? So a residential area may or may not want or need to do something in excess of 600 kilowatt hours, which is like a, grand scale. The residential application is really battery in a home, battery in a shed, and batteries, to some extent, you can do it in those locations, but there's much more strict standards. You have to have a certain size lot. you know, so let's just take, for example, in a 1 acre.
Or 120,000 square feet.
Yeah, you'd have to have at least 3 acres in order to do it
Really?
in the residential zone. So that's that
see.
added buffer protection that we've set out
Now,
for.
why such
Just
a large
to
requirement?
get-
Because can't you could put this inside of something that looks like a house, you'd never know it's even there.
They also have wall-mounted units that go
Well,
into-
that's allowable. That's not
And
what I'm
there's no
talking
height
about.
issues with these, they're low to the ground.
We can talk about that. We did it as an added measure to introduce it and everyone get comfortable with this.
Right,
It's
but
definitely
it-
allowed in all commercial districts, LI 40,
It might make it
and
too
residential,
hard.
but you have to have a certain size parcel to do
Yeah,
it.
3 acres in a residential zone may be difficult.
And we-
In
and
the
we
areas
can-
where you have a lot of houses that might need the power, so
But they can have individual batteries
they can.
all they want.
Yeah,
I suppose.
You're talking about something larger than,
I'm talking mega, like
A
big,
big
you know, the big.
facility.
The big facility, of the tier 3. Tier 1, tier 2, all zones. No
Oh,
problem.
okay.
We're talking big time,
All
you know,
right.
These are-
in
yeah.
excess of 600.
commercial.
So I know,
Yeah, as a commercial
So we just-
use is those are limited up.
so
up
what,
to use.
I imagine there's no noise impacts, because anyone who's seen a Tesla, you can't even hear the thing.
Right.
So they have to build noise into it, so people don't get run over. So-
And I would also add that there's a supplementary market for that in the small battery size for residential, so, you know, with electric cars being the largest growing sector in the market, that these batteries, there's a disposal issue with these batteries, and they have a second life in homes, which is a really good use for that kind of thing, too. There's a lot of opportunity for innovation here, you know, but we don't have a code to really make that happen, so I think that's why we're.
So, but are there
Here.
other community impacts, Janice, besides, I mean, there's
Well,
obviously no
in the
sound.
code, it requires now, we're talking tier 3 now, we're talking the large scale. The small scale, we would say, no, there are no community, you know, you put a battery in your house, you have all these, you know, you have propane tanks, you have a burner, you have, you know, it's a battery. So there's no impact to having a battery in your home.
Batteries-
But there are New York State building code issues where you've got to have the firewall protect, you know, we still have to meet the
Right.
building
Yeah,
code no matter
lithium-ion,
what.
They've been known to catch on fire and things like that.
So that's why the building code requires certain things. The same as anything else. Same way, like, I didn't know this, I just got my oil tank replaced, you have to have it 5 feet away from your burner,
Are
which I
there
didn't.
Article 12
you know, so-
standards too?
When it comes to
Like-
storage, I don't think so.
Like, do you have to put it on a concrete pad? that
If
kind
it's
of thing?
outside, like in a shed, close to your house, yes.
You know, just things to
It's-
protect groundwater.
Yep.
All right.
And
So-
flood zone and all that.
I can't be in a flood zone, so we have opportunity areas and things laid out in the code where we don't really want to see a large-scale battery proposal in a coastal area where we're going to have to deal with some kind, or a very sensitive, you know, situation. Let's just keep it out of those
And we did that
locations.
basically at the Tiana Marine Center. That was the first solar installation. We have a battery there. You know, it's a pretty good model for the residential, for the lower tier type.
Yeah, the lower tier is not when I say the impacts, I'm really talking about the higher level batteries, like an aggregate of batteries in, say, a shipping container or some structure.
For a large-scale situation like that, what happens when we have to dispose of those batteries?
So there has to be a decommissioning plan where the person who installed it is responsible to give us a plan and show how they're going to decommission it and take it away and dispose of it, because it cannot become our problem. And we have a similar thing with cell towers, like if someone puts up a cell tower and it's past its useful life, it's up to them to have to decommission it.
It was a
And-
challenge with car batteries as well, and that really has been a success as far as recycling the old batteries into new ones.
Yeah, and also recycling them to residences as well. That's been done. And also the battery, the type of battery has a lot to do with that too. So, you know, the supervisor alluded to lithium ions, but it's not just lithium ion batteries. There's a whole host of battery technologies that are out there. The great part about it is that the recycling of batteries is really pretty phenomenal. There's a lot that can be reused from the essential elements that are in it as well, instead of just being dumped in, you know, which was happening up in Canada for a period of time. They're just dumping batteries. So the technology's involved in and taking those bits and pieces from those batteries and reusing them has grown.
Is that why they, most places request, I don't know, a surcharge? So you got to give them 40 extra bucks, but if you bring it back, you get the rebate?
Yep.
Because they want it back because they can do something.
Absolutely, yeah. The batteries have, depending on their use, have a long life ahead of them. So when their first initial use, and then it can devolve to other uses as well. So yeah, exactly.
Janice, when we did the assisted living law, we worked with the industry, to make sure that the code that we were laying out worked for that they would actually, and we still haven't seen assisted living. I'm still hoping that's something that happens in the town of Southampton. But did you confer at all with the industry here?
Yes. We actually, they didn't come. They're probably watching this on live stream, but we have an applicant who wants to take advantage of this as the large-scale one in Riverside as a use on a property in close proximity to a substation there.
And this code would allow
This
that?
code would allow that. Now, we haven't worked together on the code because I really wanted to get your input and feedback and then go back to them, but we think the code, and they agreed, I think, based on the NYSERDA model, they would be able to fulfill it, because the industry is really interested in the large-scale Tier 3 stuff. The other ideas are really for just the average person or small business to have a fast-track way to put a battery in addition to their use. And we have talked to Andy from Green Logic. Lynn has helped us with this code, and
There was
people
another
who are dealing
person
with
who-
solar, had a couple solar with
I
the
sent
batteries.
somebody, I thought to you, who was also looking to do something along Sunrise Highway.
Yes,
near-
and this would be
near the
applicable
grid,
there too.
Very close to where the electric grid is.
That's right.
Would this allow
Yes.
that to move forward too?
Correct.
That's because it's
Would.
over 3 acres, right?
Yep, yes.
Okay.
And
I
the other thing is the RTW, as you know, that changed back to highway business. They had wanted to put some kind of battery storage there, which is nice for that, keeping Montauk Highway like, low traffic generating uses, something along those lines is perfect over there. But I don't know if they're going to get the agreements with LIPO or win that competition, whatever that process is. But they had expressed an interest in it as well. Those are the only ones
And
that I know.
those circles represent areas where you could do the tier, which is the heavier one, tier 3?
Well, let me let Mike talk. So.
Yeah.
Could I ask
Oh,
a
no,
question
yeah, hold
before
on a
you
second,
sit down?
calm down.
I'm really,
Sure.
thank you, Jay. In section 1 of 76, there's a line in here, and it says applicable provisions for the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention Code. We talked about fires that emanate from the battery itself. Is this done in conjunction with FRES or any other fire protection agencies? In other words, if a fire breaks out in a home that has a battery, now the home is producing energy and firefighters are putting water onto a structure. In years past, you would cut the lines, the power's dead, no real problem. However, now we would have a structure that is storing energy, and firefighters would need to know that. Now, I haven't read this, it probably addresses it.
We just went by what has already been accounted for in New York State Fire Prevention Code, and they would require an electrical permit, and we can work on that coordination with our
It
fire
seems like a
departments.
registry would be needed for, our
Potentially, yeah.
firefighters to know which houses have batteries that could backfeed on that.
There's also interconnectivity.
Interesting question, George.
Interconnectivity controls. So, typically, what you would think of if power goes out, the batteries come on, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And conversely, if there is an issue or a surge that's caused by a fluctuation in battery or fire, they also will shut down.
Yeah, like
So
emergency shut-off.
There's a lot of technologies in there that I think may be accounted.
Right.
Yeah.
We should
I
look
know
into
they've
that for sure.
experienced backfeed from solar cells, just from the lights from the trucks that come up to different structures, and, they're battling fire, and they're getting backfeed through the water. So that's something I'd like to see addressed in this.
Okay.
And I'm sure there are really smart people on this who are thinking of that.
Well, that's the purpose of this work session,
Yeah.
to get some input and
It's a very
feedback, so we
interesting
don't
question.
know all these various, so that's where your ideas come into play. So we're happy to, look into all of these ideas and
Good.
get more information.
Anything
for
else,
you.
Councilman? You're good. All right, so Michelangelo, you want to trade places there?
So we have a lot of things to unpack here. And obviously, we don't want to get confused between the small scale and the large scale. And one question I did want to address regarding this circle, this just pertains to large scale. And we're going to start with small scale, but I do want to address this. While we're seeing this going beyond the circle, there's some industry limitations. So in the center of that circle is a substation. And when let's say a large-scale proposal goes too far from a substation, it may not be economically viable. Hence why we've allowed this across residential as well as industrial and commercial, so that we can pay certain close attention to what may be available as we get and move closer to the substation. So when we think about that parcel in Hampton Bays, it's right next to a substation. So there's, it's a vacant lot, it's over 3 acres, there's no one around it, it's between 2 highways, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So when we think about this, well, does this make sense here? Yeah, it could. The safety and the precautions that we're worried about are less significant. But again, let's focus on the small scale, so we're all on the same page, and we can go to large scale. And if you have any questions, of course, I'm ready when you are.
Each one of those circles represent, at the center is a substation?
It's a substation, yeah. So one of the, when speaking with the industry, they informed us that there's really 2 significant characteristics that makes a parcel
Viable?
yeah, and that is high tension lines and distance or proximity to a substation. As well as, I guess, a third would be, is there a need? So Riverside has been identified by, I believe, LIPA or PSEG, that, and I forget it's LSRV. So they've created some kind of kickback that if they put some kind of battery storage system in Riverside, there is a financial benefit to the individual doing that, and it solves LIPA and or PSEG's infrastructure need. Now, we've approached this from the concept of almost through CCA with the idea.
This is a financial incentive.
Incentive?
Yes.
Rather than a
Kickback.
kickback.
Oh, sorry. Yes, financial incentive. Thank you.
Yes,
So-
not the word we use.
I appreciate
go
the
on.
clarification.
I had the same thought.
Glad you guys caught that. So yeah, there's a lot here. And there's one thing I do want to bring your attention to, that obviously we've recognized CCA as one of the tools in the tool shed, and this helps support that. And as well as the where we're putting these in relation to where there's need accounts for the utilities infrastructure. And Jay, you really highlighted that. So if there's any questions about that, maybe now we can address it. Otherwise, let's dive into this small scale. All right. So as of right now, with the New York State Building Code, battery storage is allowed between 0 and 80 kilowatts. Those standards change when you get above 20 kilowatts to 80 kilowatts, because it now transitions to garage or outdoor, but it's essentially an aggregate of 80 is allowed, and one requires a building permit. And what you don't have in front of your desk is our new battery energy storage system permit application, which I'm going to pass out. There's only 2 copies, hopefully not violating a COVID restriction by passing them along. But essentially, if you are now applying for a 0 to 600, this code is applicable. And while we've added new standards for 40 to 80, we've also added new standards from 80 to 600. So it goes above and beyond what the state is requiring. And some of these standards are in relation to your setbacks, your location, and screening. A fence may be permitted if it's a 100 kilowatt system. Now, some of these systems don't entirely make sense for what a home may require. However, we don't want to limit how homes may seek to be more energy efficient and or energy sovereign in the future. We recognize that when we talk about energy, there's always somewhat of a macro approach, that we're going to put wind turbines 20 miles off the coast, and that's going to support people. And we recognize that there's a loss of energy between where that wind energy gets to the substation that's upwards of 30–40%. So the future, we do see that homes will be storing energy on site. And Jay, as you pointed out, you can siphon off peak and then redistribute on peak. So This is what we've contemplated in respect to NYSERDA's model code.
Michelangelo, when you say like 20 to 80 or 80 to whatever, 300, like most people, including myself.
You don't know what that
agree?
means.
Yeah, so like what does a typical house need? Let's say a house wants to do what you're talking about, maybe buy the energy at night, store it, and use it during the day. Or
Right.
maybe they have solar
Well,
panels.
a typical house is a really interesting question for the Hamptons. So we have very large homes, and some people may want to be able to use their battery storage for multiple days. Let's say you run on solar, or you hope to run on solar, and the sun doesn't shine. You have that option of tapping into your battery unit. Lynn may be able to better address this. This is something I too have struggled with to get an idea. But again, we wrote this code so it wouldn't limit people to participate.
So is that
20 to 30 is, yes, of course, the tip, 20 to 30 kilowatts.
20, 30?
Yeah.
20 to 30.
But as you know, the size of the homes out here, that quickly changes.
So a
And it
bigger
also
home.
depends on the efficiency of the home itself. So
Correct.
There's a whole bunch of ratings in between there that have.
So let's say a low ranch on a parcel, half acre, 1 bedroom, 1 kitchen, garage. So we're saying 20 to 30
20,
kilowatt.
Lynn, do
roughly.
you mind if I check with you?
And I know that depends if you have an air conditioning system or an electric hot water heater and a pump and, just,
You're actually right on it.
okay.
Hi, my name is Lynn Arthur, Energy Chair for the Sustainability Committee. Tommy John, you're right on it. It really depends on the systems. If the homeowner is using the battery as an emergency backup, as an example, that battery has to have enough to drive, for example, the heating system, which there's always, there's a surge when a compressor comes on. In an emergency situation, you're not going to have that battery in your critical load is not going to be, for example, the air conditioner. But in the middle of winter, it's going to need to turn on the heating system. I'm in the process of retrofitting my house with a geothermal system. So we sized, in my case, and I have a small house, it's 1,800 square feet, with the geothermal system, because what's required in order to kick it over, I'm going to need somewhere between a 20 and 30 kW battery. So it really depends on the app. To answer your question, it really depends on the application, and there are kind of 3. One is for resilience. That would be the emergency generator. Instead of having a carbon-based one, you'd have a battery. The second one is arbitrage. Buy power at night at cheap, which is a penny a kilowatt hour between midnight and 7 a.m., and then run your house off the battery during the day, if you can.
What's the price during the day?
Well, right now, it's the price that we all pay if you're on the rate 180, it's 10.5 cents for a kilowatt hour. But fully loaded with the transmission and distribution cost and the other costs, the taxes, is around 22 cents on average a kilowatt hour.
So you're talking 22 cents versus 1 cent?
Well, no, because even at the 1 cent, you still have some of those other fees.
You do, yeah, you do, but it's 1 cent for so there's to the 2 portions of your bill, which are pretty much 45% and 45%. So the power supply would be a penny versus 10.5 cents a kilowatt hour, but the T&D cost is still the same. So that would be about another 10 cents.
So it's still, yeah, so you're,
It's
11
about
versus
it's
one.
Yeah, so
about
it's
double.
11. So you're saving about half. I mean, that's a potential.
And to put that in perspective, we have the 3rd or 4th highest rate per kilowatt hour in the country, and here on Long Island. We compete with Hawaii off and on, but,
Well-
just put that in perspective too. It's, there's a lot of add-on costs to the actual cost of producing versus all the stuff that's laid on top of it.
Yeah, and by the way, I've been working with John and the committee. We are in the process of getting a NYSERDA grant to run a battery storage program for residential, to promote batteries here, for residential and small businesses. So you'll hopefully be hearing more about that from us in about a month.
so just a little more on this issue of the arbitrage issue. So can you make it pay for itself?
Absolutely. Well,
You're getting the
Not
energy
really.
at half price.
yeah,
So whatever your
in about
half your
17
utility
years.
bill. Takes about 17 years.
I know, I'm just making a
So the
joke.
cost of the battery is
Yeah.
still pretty expensive and
It is,
hooking
yeah.
it all up.
Well, and we're working on that right now. The battery prices are
And the
coming.
battery life 17 years?
Oh, no, the battery life is, it varies based on the battery.
Wow.
It's a matter of how many times you cycle it, you know, how many times you
Discharge
charge it
rates.
and discharge it, right? And then also the life cycle and the technology. As you were talking about earlier, about public safety, some batteries, they're all lithium ion, but some of them are phosphate, the chemistry, and some of them are manganese. Manganese, if you remember from your science class back, well, yeah, right, back in 5th grade, you drop manganese and set it on fire, drop it in water, you can't put it out with water. In fact, you can't put it out, period. Phosphate is safer. Phosphate can be put out with spray foam. So, you know, these are some of the considerations
But
when
not
you're.
PFAS.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there you go. But these are some of the considerations when you're, you know, evaluating the options. But the
So
battery.
it sounds like it's not yet, maybe it's break even, maybe after a number of years, but whatever. It doesn't sounds like it's not the best business model yet.
Well,
I would disagree with that.
Yeah.
You know, the industry right now is making huge technological leaps as we speak. So the timing now for what we're proposing is going to be aligned with that. And there's a lot of changes in the way batteries are generated, which affects both size, discharge rates, which is a big issue, and the internal controls on batteries to control discharge rates, which has a big effect on longevity of batteries going into the future. So I frankly think this is the perfect time to start this, because we're seeing this huge change in the battery industry. People have realized that this is what they need to do.
and the way you have to evaluate it is you have to look at a stack of benefits. So you have resilience that has a quantitative value to it. You have the arbitrage. The other thing you've got is PSEG will pay you to discharge your battery during peak. And we're working together to fight for a higher payout, because we happen to be in a load pocket on, you know, east of the canal. And then in addition, there's this LSRV zone in the, you know, Flanders, Northampton area.
Can you explain what LSRB stands for, please?
Load serving, I don't know.
Or
actually.
just an
Yeah,
explanation of what it is?
So
What's the rebate?
PSEG has identified areas of severe constraint where they cannot get, where demand is exceeding their ability to supply, and it has to do typically with the transmission system. You know, it's like there's some places where there's a garden hose and there's some places where there's a fire hose. And in the places where there's a garden hose, there's been enormous amount of density growth, and therefore they just can't get enough capacity in there. So these technologies like batteries and smart thermostats, they're paying under the direct load management tariff a higher payout if you participate in those programs. So by, you know, again, working with NYSERDA, we see Southampton has all of the issues and also is eligible for all of these benefits. So NYSERDA is working with us to help get a program here to encourage residents in these areas to make the investment that will help both the residents become more resilient, lower their costs, create cash flows, but also help PSEG manage the grid. So it's a
Lynn?
win-win.
This summer, we had a number of blackouts during some hot weather. Was that from LIPA? They turned off different areas?
I have
In the
to,
eastern parts of the town, it was, well,
yeah.
no electricity, you know, and it was just a couple of hours. There was no, was
Yeah,
that because of a
That's usually.
load issue?
I'd have to look specifically
Okay.
at the outage you're referring to in order to give you a proper response, but typically during summer peak, we have more demand than supply, especially with all the influx of people as a result of COVID. So this is a problem, you know, and what the utility, there's a consequence, as I have the opportunity since I'm here, there's a consequence of doing nothing. And John and I talk about this all the time, and you're right on it. So when you have that situation, what the utility has done, and actually Mr. Burke is involved in this as well, the utility has signed up companies that have fossil fuel based emergency generators to turn on
Right.
those generators during those periods to avoid that situation. You know, legitimate need, but if we had utility scale batteries in these places where Michael has and Janice have identified, or if we have a battery program and people adopt this technology more as pervasively as we have solar, just think, they wouldn't have to, PSEG wouldn't have to turn to those carbon-based generators to, you know, help the grid.
Many
Right.
residential homes have backup generators. Some of them are built into the system. Some are ones that you wheel out of your garage and turn on, and they're gas. Would a residential battery like this power a home for, let's say, a day or 2 days?
Well, it's,
Depending on usage, of course.
I mean, yes, but it depends, right? It depends on what, you know, when you, and this will be part of all of the marketing that we're going to put together, you know, working with the town to educate potential consumers. It depends on your critical load. You know, you're not going to run your pool pump and your air conditioner in the summer on a battery. It's just too much load. You know, it's a matter of how much cost you want to put into buying a pack of batteries. I mean, I know Julie, for example, has a lot of refrigeration on her property, and your solar that you already have can hardly keep up with generating enough to feed. So imagine in a backup situation, you know, how much are you willing to invest in the size of the battery or a stack of batteries, a string of batteries? It all depends, and that's part of the initial, you know, when we go to the house to size up what the critical loads are.
Right. I know when the power's out, at least in my neighborhood, you know, people pull out their gas generators, and it's very loud, you know, it's for days. It's, you know,
So
they want the energy. John, if I can finish. Would this code also require different appliances to have capacitors in them? There are some appliances that don't have capacitors, others that do, which is essentially an internal storage to kickstart a compressor or you know, a high-powered.
That's a question we might have to get back to you on.
Okay.
Many of these, the technicalities, we defaulted to NYSERDA.
Right.
And which has, of course, the New York State Building Code, the fire code, the electrical code built into it. So it's something like that we're going to have
Okay.
to double
And-
check.
All right. I haven't read it. So.
No, it's okay, and there's a lot going on here. So you reference our code, and then of course we have to actually reference the New York State Building Code. And a great example to talk about these larger systems that are still considered small scale, the 80 to 600. If one were to go above 80 on a residential property, you're now dealing with a whole set of requirements from the state, let alone our own. And our own will be more based on aesthetics and where it's occurring on the property, but the state is going to be really honing in on safety.
Okay.
Yep.
So I just wanted to make one clarification on this issue with the, you know, you were talking about brownouts or similar to that. So some municipalities, that's what they do. When they don't have enough power to meet demand, they reduce power in certain areas. We don't tend to, PSEG doesn't tend to do that. What they did was entered into a contract to try to tap into local generators to produce power that would feed into the grid. And that completely contradicts our goals of net neutrality, because these are mostly fossil fuel driven types of generators. So any amount of power consumption you can shave off that peak has a huge effect going down to exactly the issue that you have, that everybody rolls out their generators and fires them up, and then, you know, you have to listen to that for a long period of time. And you know, back to that problem, I think sort of is a good illustration of what we're faced with here and what we expect we will be faced with here, particularly with the population as it is, as it's growing, the consumption as it's growing right now. You know, we do a lot of work to try to make buildings more efficient. We do as much as that we can do to do that, but ultimately, we're in a power crisis in a way. And the grid, for your question, Julie, is old and is very inefficient. There's a lot of heat loss. So the electron that's coming from here to here isn't the same number. You know, it's lost through heat and a whole bunch of other reasons because of these constrictions that happen and all those kinds of things.
So I just have one last quick question. So for somebody, a regular person who maybe just wants to power their refrigerator during the 3 days after the hurricane, this, maybe the 40-watt battery would be okay for them to do? You don't want to power your pool or?
10 kW, $7,000 installed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. For those who didn't hear it, 10 kW, $7,000 installed.
What is that, the whole system?
Everything, a critical load panel and the installation with a certified electrician, and we hope to be rolling out as part of this program with the town's support, in about a month.
And that will cover 10 kW's typical home?
Smaller side home.
Smaller size?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of.
What's smallest size in the Hamptons? 3,000?
A refrigerator.
I have an 1,800 square foot home, and I just would like my refrigerator to run so my food doesn't get spoiled, and so I have lights and maybe TV at night so I don't get bored. That's what I'm looking for.
And that's what we're striving for.
We'll send you a board game.
It's very simple.
Yeah.
Right to the point.
So, okay, but, I'm sorry?
Just before you go back.
Sure. Go ahead.
So I don't know at this point if you want to go, literally, we're running low on time, if you want to actually go through the code or take your time to read it. Mike was prepared to go line by line, section by section. I
We'd
think
have
you
to
want to
schedule a
take your
public
time.
hearing. Is there a resolution?
No,
Just schedule a
no,
public
no, no. We wanted to get your input and feedback before we put it on the agenda, and just, we can we can have a second work session, or I could put it on we're going to come back with another work session at a different time about solar for the same purpose, large-scale solar code,
Can you
which we're
tell us,
developing.
like, a real quick sort of cliff note, the three different areas and requirements that are contained in your legislation? And
Yes.
maybe the board will be comfortable enough to go to,
Public hearing.
hearing.
Sure, let me have Mike do that.
Let's see if I can quickly.
you got 5 minutes.
All right, let's see what I can do, right? So I am a homeowner. I come into the town. I'm going to get this application. This is going to replace the building permit. I'm going to sign all of this with my contractor, and I'm going to submit. And I am now in the process of getting battery storage at my home. Now, that's tier one. So the town has, the state has had tier 1 through 3. They reduced it to tier 1 through 2. We approached this kind of in a pseudo tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 1 being this 0 to 40, this tier 2 being 40 maybe, or 80 to 600, and our tier 3, of course, being 600 and above. Now, we spent the predominant amount of time, a significant amount of time talking about tier 1 to tier 2. Tier 3 is special exception standards, which is on page 5, 330-162.22. So this is our third party who seeks to put a large-scale battery storage unit in Riverside or in Hampton Bays or elsewhere. That's where it comes into relations with this circle. We're allowing this in R60 and above. We would be, but with the notion that you cannot have below 3 acres. But we would hope that much of this would be taking place on commercial and/or industrial. Riverside is the example.
So you don't need 3 acres if you're on a commercial property?
No, you do not.
Okay.
Yeah, this
Only
residential is the
residential.
3-acre restriction.
This is for that big tier,
Yeah,
large,
from
over
the
600.
tier 3.
Right.
So commercial could do smaller standards, and within 162.22, we have setbacks, we have requirements and restrictions that speak to aesthetics. We talk about noise, avoidance, and of course, the submission process. So perhaps this is something you
So
want to
that's all
look at.
special exemption, you're saying?
Special exception.
Special exceptions, you go to the planning
Go to
board.
the planning board.
So you can't do it as of right. Well, if you meet the standards, you can, supposedly.
No, you're going to be going to a special exception, planning board regardless, as soon as you go
For
above
special
600.
exception.
Yeah, for a special
But
exception.
if you meet the standards, they should give you it, right? Theoretically.
Yes.
The idea of
Yes.
special use permits.
Yeah.
Right, but they get to decide whether you meet the standards, so. Well,
Are there
Are the standards in the code, so you should be.
right, hopefully they're
But it has that level of
objective.
scrutiny by a board versus just a fast track through an administrative process.
Okay.
Correct, the big difference between below 600 and above 600.
Yeah, and because you should consider the impact, and that should be
And
transparent.
that's,
Absolutely.
the special exception is all of the larger facilities, not just the ones in residential zones?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, I don't, like we said, we don't necessarily want to go line by line for special exception standards,
Right.
but this gives you the idea that, yes, we want this to be accessible, and we don't want to limit the industry. That being said, we want to take safety and precautions, and of course, what this town looks like into consideration. And we want this to be battery storage of the Hamptons, not battery storage of some other town. Do we have any other questions?
No.
I went quick on that one, huh? I did under 5.
All right, I mean.
Probably, but,
Now, we'll probably have you back.
yeah.
So if you're comfortable enough, if you take some time to read the standards, and we'll get the answers to the questions like Tommy John had.
Well, we don't,
and-
yeah, we don't have a resolution on the packet, so that
No,
gives us
no,
time
no.
to review it, but I would say, yeah, let's prepare a resolution to set it for public hearing. We don't have to, introduce it, or we don't have to necessarily pass the resolution. Can table it till we're comfortable, but.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, you can get you some industry perspective. We can invite some firefighting professionals to come
I think
and
there's a
talk to
time
you about it.
sensitivity here, because I know of at least one property that wants to do this.
Yes, there is, I
There's
guess,
a
a push to get a code in place so that they can take advantage of these LSRV incentives that are going on through LIPA.
Right, so is everybody okay with?
Yeah, I just, I
So the
don't mean
resolution to
stop
notice a
this.
public
I-
hearing?
I will bring it to the fire marshal, and, it's been
Great.
addressed, it's already, there's code in here for the executive law, I'm looking at it, so we'll take a look at that as well. As per my question, I think this is a key component to what we want to do here in the town of Southampton and the country, as far as, upgrading our electricity and making ourselves self-sustainable.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I guess since we missed the deadline, unless I did it as a walk-on, I would put on a resolution for the November 10th agenda to set a hearing, because it's chapter 330, it would have to be later.
Let's just put it in the next packet.
Okay,
Yeah, rather than, walk-ons really should be.
yeah, let's not do that. So I'm just saying November 10th packet, you'll, not November 10th. Yeah,
Yeah,
November 10th. That's the next one.
yeah, we'll have it in that packet.
Yes.
Okay?
Great.
And if the board still has questions, we can table the resolution.
It would just be setting a hearing anyway, and then we
Right.
can move forward from there.
Right, and we might make changes after the hearing.
Absolutely.
So-
So you might hear things
Or
from
we
the
might want to
industry.
keep the record open.
Right.
Well, the code's gonna have to evolve with these changes as they come forward anyway, so I fully expect that over time.
All right,
There's
so
some
we'll-
large-scale changes coming to battery technology.
Okay, good. So you'll see this upcoming for
So you're
the
okay with
November
that?
10th packet.
Yeah, okay, we're all good.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you. All right, we're a little bit behind schedule, about 20 minutes or so, but we're going to switch topics. We're going to move on to Watermill CAC. They have a proposal for a park in Watermill. And who is joining us? I see Steve Abramson is here.
Yes,
Tim Marin. Okay, not Rachel, right?
no.
Okay, and Lisa Combrick.
I'm just observing.
Okay,
Sit in.
all right, so Steve, we're setting you up.
Okay to distribute these?
You can circulate them, maybe, I don't know, yeah, maybe through Janice.
Yes, there should be 6 there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another extra 2 if you need it.
Okay.
You wanna do this one? Sure.
This is, yeah. We don't want this.
Well,
Complicates any possible acquisition during this kind of work session. It's not our property. It's like talking about building a park on somebody else's property.
Steve Abramson, Watermill CAC, Supervisor Schneiderman, members of the town board, Lisa Combrick, representing the Community Preservation Fund. Thanks for this opportunity to speak to you. We have before you this morning a proposal that is fully endorsed by the Watermills community for the development of a park in Watermill that really is a grand gateway to the east end of Southampton town. I'm going to first point out to you what it does. It's a purchase of a 7-acre property that happens to be waterfront that will create an 8.5-acre waterfront park. If only we could do that magic all the time, make 7, 8.5. It creates a scenic quarter-mile view on Route 27 that does not exist now. It preserves and protects 944 feet of waterfront that leads into Mecox Bay. It resides within a high-priority water quality improvement zone, and it provides public canoe access to Mecox Bay from a site north of the highway. It creates a recreational park with a 1/3 mile jogging, walking loop. So this is Settlers Field. You're probably familiar with this. This is at the foot of Head of Pond and the highway. It was dedicated in 2006. It's an 1.5 acres. It was provided with about 80% of town funds and about 20% of contributions. This is the map of Watermill in 1670. I kept it here. You can barely make this out on the screen, but if you look at the top left, you'll see that there is a very faint area that is yellow. I don't know if you can see that, but it is the area of the land that we're talking about now, and just to the right of it is where the original watermill was built when 40 acres were given to Edward Howell by England to create the first watermill in New York State. And that became the hub of the Watermill Hamlet community. Everything grew around that. So this is within the town heritage resource area, which has been described as an area that when grouped together, that it provides educational value and it helps convey the special meaning of our hamlet, and is such as important and should be advanced. This was by town resolution in 2005. This shows the high priority area for the watershed, and where the arrow is, that's where the property is. It sits right between, above it, Mill Pond, which is a 92-acre freshwater lake that goes through the watermill, which gave Watermill community its name, into Mecox Bay. This shows you the area between the waters, and you can see here, if you look at the lower left, you can recognize that triangular property, Settlers Field, and to the right of it, if you were to extend that triangle up to the water, is the property that we're talking about. In the top right corner, you'll see the shops that are in Watermill. So that is about a 1/4 mile walk from the shops, by foot, of course. So this property that we're talking about, 6 acres, almost 7, is 944 feet on Mill Creek between Mecox Bay and Mill Pond. It has 3 houses on it currently. To the bottom of it, you'll see a street which feeds for the houses on that property, and the concept is to actually eliminate those houses and create that joint park with Settlers Field. There's a rendering coming up which we will show you what that park would look like. So this is the combined area. And what's really meaningful here, if you follow that red line along the highway, there's that long stretch along that property that you never look at because it's got a picket fence on it. It keeps your eyes from staring in that direction. That would go when that park is, and the trees opened up so that you could look through, creating quite the scenic vista from the highway coming from the east. And also some, of course, if you were kind of like looking too long to the left while you're driving from east to west. But if you are starting well below Head of Pond as you start to approach it, there's quite a vista to be seen. It's also a 1/4 mile from the Parish Art Museum, a walkable distance within 4 minutes. So it combines these areas around of use. I can't see the number of this slide. What number do you have over there? 'Cause I don't want to.
13, I think.
Say 13?
Yes. 13.
Okay, there's a video here that should be playing now. Yes? This is the fence that runs along that road. So on the top where you see the bridge, from that bridge all the way down now to Head of Pond Road, there will be this big park long vista that you will see.
I think it was slide 9.
All right, this is the parkland that you would see in that quarter-mile distance. And I'd like to go back to that slide and see if we can't run that video. It should be, if you just click on image, it should run. That's a drone image. There you go. That's running now, I think. Okay. So if you looked straight ahead from the corner, straight through, you see where it would be a straight line along to the highway, but it doglegs around this body of water, Mill Creek, which now you would be seeing and looking through all the way while you're traveling to the east end of the town. So,
In other words, you'd have to cut some of the trees down, right?
or head them up, take the branches down. Some of the trees are not native and would go, but you would head them up. We'll show you what that will look like. And this is, again, the view coming from the east now, and where you never pay any attention except you see this little body of water to the right, which some people think is Mill Pond, and it's not. It's just the extension from Mill Pond that spills into Becox Bay. But you can see that land and its waterfront that would then become part of the park. Again, this shows you someone driving along. It's above car height, of course, but you can see the fence there that runs that whole long distance and see how long it takes to just drive along it. But all this time, while you're driving along at normal speed, you would be exposed to a beautiful park when it's all said and done. That fence again goes. It's that quarter-mile long view. This is what it looks like from the property to, over some of the waterfront. It's really quite a beautiful piece of property. This is the road that is Old Country Road. It's the leg that divides Settlers Field from the Burden property. When they're joined, there would be no need for this extension because this is the part that feeds the houses on that property. So that fence would come down, this road would go, it would all become part of one.
So the triangle park would just continue straight through?
Straight through. And here is the rendering. This was done pro bono by LaGuardia Design, which did a beautiful job, I think, of bringing an image to us, a concept, where you have now that loop in the middle is 1/3 of a mile for walking, jogging. It extends into Settlers Field itself. There's parking along the other leg of Old Country Road, which feeds the houses on that street that would remain, with parking up there at the top. So it would be quite the vista going right through all of that land through to the water. The other thing I would like to say here and give Tim an opportunity to talk to is what has happened in the development of all of this area. For those of you who don't know Tim Marin well, he's a modest guy who doesn't blow his own horn much, but our hospital wouldn't have the strength it has without his presence on the board. The Watermill community would not be as strong as it is with his leadership on the Watermill Community Club and taking care of all of the properties that have been there. And for decades, his work has been extremely good for just Watermill, not just Watermill, but for the town as a whole. So Tim, do you want to talk?
Not really. I'm going to give the handout to the town clerk, which she'll circulate that around to everybody. I think that's the normal protocol, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's fine, Tim, yeah. Good to see you.
Tim Marin, actually a resident of Southampton now. I moved to Watermill when I was 10 years old. We resided on Cobb Road for 67 years. This handout is a brief synopsis of the history of some of the properties that are quasi-public, which are supported by the Watermill Park District. It includes the Village Green, which was donated to the community of Watermill back in the mid-30s.
That's where the windmill is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It includes the Watermill Community Fields, which are between Nordona and Deerfield Road. Several families, including my dad and mom, purchased that property back in the early 60s and donated the property to the community club, the Watermill Community Club. Another...
Are those open to the, is that open to the public or no?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, it's a membership organization. We do not discriminate as to the use of the property. The only thing that we do control is if it's a use that we don't feel is appropriate, then we have the right to step in and prevent it.
Okay.
But for all intents and purposes, it's free for everybody to use.
And the Park District contributes to that? Is
The
that-
Park District contributes to that, correct.
Okay.
That is a baseball field, right?
Baseball
Like the Little
fields,
League field
soccer
is?
fields,
You'll see soccer games there all the time. with
Excellent.
a lot of-
3 tennis courts, which...
Best field in the league in the 1970s.
I didn't realize that was open to the public.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As is the community, the Village Green.
Right.
I mean, anybody can stop and walk on the Village Green, take a picture, have a picnic. It's free. And it cost, neither of those parcels cost the town of Southampton anything in the acquisition process. And for years, many of us in the community took care of the maintenance of the, we call it the community fields, the recreation fields. I mowed lawns. I raked the grass. I probably helped at 10 years old, well, 12 years old, to develop that property into what it is today. And the same thing, now Settlers Field was purchased by the town CPF funds. The approximate cost of Settlers Field was $350,000. The town contributed about $275,000. I was successful in raising $75,000 from about 10 families, and we made up the differential. In addition, we had a general fundraiser, which raised another $25,000 or $30,000, which cleared the land. It had all become overgrown, landscaped it, planted grass seed, irrigated it, etc. So that was all, again, done with all community raised, privately raised funds.
Are there any restrictions currently on that triangle?
You'd have to ask Lisa, I don't know.
Because, I mean, I see this is being incorporated into the park.
It's just a pathway that goes through.
As far as,
Jogging and walking.
no, nobody's preventing people from walking on it, and I know at the time there was some discussion, well, are you gonna build another baseball field? That was the site of the original Little League field. And that's outlined in my, yes. In 1952, Watermill was asked to participate in the South Fork Little League. At that time, it was East Hampton, Bridgehampton, Watermill, and Southampton. And I think the following year, Sag Harbor was added. It's 1 or 2 years later. And that was the first Little League program here on the east end of Long Island. And that was a field that, as a kid, I was a lousy baseball player. I admit it. I rode the bench. Okay? But we had to raise a team, and I was a body.
You had fun, right? That's all.
I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. And the parents and the farmers actually created that field. They came in, they graded it, they put the clay in for the field. We built our own backstop, and we played our games there.
Right where that triangle is?
Yep.
I could see it on,
Broke a few windshields.
it's on our aerial
Pros or
photos.
hits?
Home plate was in the northern point of the triangle.
Yep.
I'm looking
Yep.
at it.
Yeah, it was a great spot.
So yeah,
And-
so you're in the middle of telling us about different community types of facilities in the Watermill area, so I didn't want to interrupt for too much, so get you back on track here.
No, now, when the Villa Maria was sold, we worked extensively with the nuns, who were the original owners of the Village Green. The Village Green was originally part of the common property in the town, back in the 1640s. Over the years, it was sold by the trustees of the proprietors. I've got that right, I think. And that became part of the Morse estate, which is what we know as the Villa Maria. The nuns wanted to donate that triangle to the town of Southampton. It's the middle of the Depression. The town did not want it. So a group of residents in Watermill created the Watermill Village Improvement Association. And that association received ownership of what we know as the Village Green, the windmill, the war memorial, the flagpole. So, and that parcel right now receives funding of about $25,000 a year to maintain the lawns and so forth. The windmill was restored back in the 80s, completely taken apart and rebuilt, all with community-raised funds. And usually what has happened, we've had occasions where the fans on the windmill have rotted, the center core rotted. We've raised, I think the original cost to do the renovation was about $250,000. And we had a series of cocktail parties and fundraisers. This is long before the Park District. That was what we used for that. Then we had, as I said, other repairs. Normally speaking, we just send out one letter to the taxpayers within the community, and we receive donations that are usually satisfactory in supplying the money that's needed for the project. Then the other facility, obviously, is the Watermill Community House. And you all know that building. It's the white church-like building on the right-hand side, going east, on the south side of the road. Community House was built in the late 1800s as a church. The church was abandoned in the 1920s. It became the Southampton Grange Hall. And in probably the 1980s, the association that was managing the community house had more or less become defunct. In the meantime, the Watermill Community Club was actively using it for all of their meetings and social gatherings. We took it over as a community hall. It's used by anybody that wants to, if it's a public organization, for example, the CAC meets there free of charge for all of their meetings.
Who actually owns this? Town-owned, or you guys own it?
Oh, we own it.
You own it.
Watermill Community Club owns it.
Okay.
And we manage it.
And you get Park Reserve money for that, too, right?
We get Park District money for that. But the ownership, again, was never part of anything that the town contributed. So all of these, okay, we're starting from Settlers Field, you contributed to that. You did not contribute to the Village Green, did not contribute to the community house, and did not contribute to the Watermill Community Fields, which are between Nowodona and Deerfield. And the Park District funds, I might add, are only charged against the residents of Watermill.
Sure. Now, how much do you get for that building?
Well, we get, the way it works out right now, there's about a total, I'm approximating here. We receive about $180,000 for the 3 facilities, that being the Village Green, the Community House, and the Village Fields, the recreation fields. And then in that Park District budget, there's another appropriation of about $20,000 that diverts to the Parks and Recreation Department, and they manage the Settlers Field property, because you own it.
Right. And who else is on the board besides you with that community?
Oh, it consists of the president and the treasurer of each of the 3 organizations. The Watermill Community Club, the Watermill Museum, and the Watermill Village Improvement Association. And I forgot to mention the museum, because that's a significant part of Watermill. They receive funding from the Park District, and they've used their funding to really basically rebuild and restore the original Watermill.
And that's a full-time museum there?
Well, it's seasonal.
Seasonal?
Seasonal.
Right. It's not a residency, though? It's
Oh, absolutely not.
just a museum?
No. And it's a working mill. Now, when we restored, we had to restore the water wheel on the, I guess it'd be the east side of the building. And that was a $250,000 restoration project, all privately funded.
Now, that gets also Park District funds, too, or no?
They receive Park District. They receive about $80,000 a year. The community club receives about $80,000 a year. And the Village Improvement Association, which is the Village Green, is about $25,000 a year. And then, as I said, another $20,000 a year comes from Park District funds for the maintenance and upkeep of Settlers Field.
That was great. As you can see, he's a font of information with regard to Watermill and the town. I just wanted to emphasize once again that all of those funds from the Park District are taxed to the residents of Watermill alone, not spread over anyone else in the town, even though all of these facilities are available for public use for anyone. And that is the vision that would be with this new park too. It would come on the back of Watermill for the benefit of everybody. That's important. And
I know you're proposing to, well, I mean, I probably should have asked this a long time ago, that you've obviously spoken with the property owner. This is not something, the town currently does not
Well,
own
I
this.
have not.
We have the cooperation, we're talking about
Tim,
building a park on somebody's property.
no, the property is currently on the market.
Okay.
There is conversation being held with the Peconic Land Trust and with the broker for the property and the owners. It's an estate sale.
Okay. So they don't object to, well, it's for sale, right?
It's for sale.
It's for sale. And the buildings, there's no historic buildings there? They'd all be torn down?
It'll all be torn down.
Does that mean there's nothing historic there, or does that mean?
There's nothing that's considered to be really historic there at all. There is a building there, a house that was built in 1910. If someone wanted that instead of it being torn down, it could easily be moved to someplace where it could function if the town had a need for some building someplace and on some piece of land. That would be fine.
Could I contribute something to that?
Please, yeah, I didn't.
They're not gonna be able to pick you up on that.
I can speak about it. Right now, the Watermill maintains the windmill, which dated back to the 1800s. Of course, the flagpole and the associated items there, the war memorial. The community house, which is an 1890s building. And then, of course, the buildings over on the recreation field and the watermill. And I think all of us that have looked at this particular project as a possibility have said to ourselves, Watermill already maintains a pretty significant amount of historic structures. And it's a lot of management. All of the management is done by volunteers. We have one full, no, I can't call it full. We have one paid employee who acts as a property manager for the Watermill Community Club to oversee the snow plowing, to oversee the opening and closing, to make sure that the contractors that are hired are doing what they're hired to do. And we pay him a stipend of $3,000 a year. He's a longtime community member. The museum, which, as I said, it dates back into the 1600s. Parts of that museum were moved from one location to where it is now. Their board is actively involved in the management of that property, all as volunteers. And the village, so you got the Village Improvement Association, the Watermill Community House, which is belongs to the Watermill Community Club. That takes a lot of management. A lot of our income, by the way, in addition to the Park District funding, has been field rental. There's a baseball camp that rents the fields, and other rental situations. So we have enough revenue coming in to do capital projects over and above the basic expenses of running mowing the fields, paying the electric, paying the insurance, and so forth. So it's, and each of the three organizations work so closely together. I get emotional because it was a special place to live and grow up. And I'll be 80 shortly. I can't believe how good Watermill was to me and to everybody that I've made friends with. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the information.
So
Thank you for all you've done for the Watermill community.
you can see the passion is genuine, and for Southampton as a whole. And didn't you head the board over there at the hospital for a while? You certainly were on it for a long time.
18 years?
That's great.
Yeah, we wouldn't have the hospital that we have today without Tim Marin.
In closing,
I think one other thing I'll show you. I was tempted not to. Where did that come from up there?
Sorry.
So Steve, can you finish the vision for me? Like who's buying the property, who's gonna build the park, who's gonna maintain it down the road? All that. Like,
Well, I
what's the-
think that would have to be, honestly, I have not gotten into that in detail. Tim more so than I, and Lisa, perhaps.
Lisa, you want to?
well, do we want to, are you done with your PowerPoint?
Well, I was going to show you one other thing, because I'm sure everybody will, at some point, say, how come we're going to spend that kind of money on Watermill? I don't know if you can see this. But you can probably see the top line there, that since its inception, Watermill alone has contributed 11% of CPF revenue. Bridgehampton, also part of the east end of the town that would pass this park every day, contributed 13.3% of the town revenue. Sagaponack Village and Sagaponack, 8%. So a total of 1/3 of all of the CPF funds have been paid for by the communities that will ride by this park every day. And in terms of Watermill itself, because my eyes aren't good enough anymore, but
Those numbers are in millions?
millions, 108. That Watermill is 11% of the revenues and 7.5% of the park CPF expenditures. Okay, 11% of the revenues and
When did
some
you get
7.
those, when did you get those numbers?
Where did I get them?
Yeah,
CPF.
so it's,
We foiled for them.
Lisa, is that correct? Have we broken $1 billion in the town of Southampton since the beginning of the program now?
I'm not sure if we have or not.
I think so.
We have these all available on the website that are updated.
I know the program for the East End has, for the 5 East End towns, but I hadn't heard that
Yeah.
Southampton alone had hit that number, which is, I think, a milestone.
I'll gladly send this to you.
Yeah,
It's not on the printout that I made for you, but I'll
I
certainly
think
send it
that's
to you.
aggregate. no?
I asked for it because I anticipated
yeah, well,
a dollar question,
1,000 million is a billion.
you know.
Sounds like
The-
we,
the-
we
The fact is that Watermill has contributed, as the index line shows on the right, by revenue to purchases, we have contributed 44% more money than has gone into preservation of land in Watermill. And this park is not just for Watermill, this is definitely for the East End, and definitely is a good heritage expenditure for going forward for this town as to what it will have. It'll be the most beautiful entry to the East End that anybody could possibly imagine. We've never had anything like it.
Okay, we understand the point. It says Watermill is contributing sizably to the fund
Yeah,
and hasn't gotten back its fair share, though we don't like to think like that.
we're not thinking like that, but I just wanted
Yeah.
to certainly dispense with the notion that Watermill has, Little Watermill shouldn't be getting this kind of contribution.
Understood. Point made. All right, thank you, Steve. Lisa, do you want to come up
Thank you.
and answer, who was it, Tommy John's question?
Nope, I didn't ask any
Or
questions.
John? Who asked the question? Oh, Rick, Councilman Martellus.
Right. Good morning, everybody. Lisa Combring, CPF manager. I just wanted to point out that the property, as Steve and Tim mentioned, is on the market. It was brought to CPF for consideration. And I know that there are several family members that are involved in the sale, and this is on for further discussion with you today.
Thank you, Lisa.
Mr. Maron, you have to come back up.
When you took over the, and I point this out, by the way, in the handout. When you purchased the Settlers Field project, for the first 2 or 3 years after that purchase, the Watermill Village Improvement Association, who owns the Village Green, took over the maintenance, management, lawn cutting and so forth, with a stipend through their budget for that purpose from the Park District. And the town decided they were better equipped to take care of the management than the Village Improvement Association. And frankly, I agreed with them. I felt that there was a legal issue here as far as legal liability. The town had insurance. It was costing money for the insurance on that. It was complicated. So the town took over that management, and then that's how the appropriation of $20,000 came about for that within the Park District. But that actually filters through the Town Parks and Recreation Department. I would anticipate that the same situation will take place if you're successful in purchasing this property. That the town will manage it, and the funding for that will have to be worked out. The purchase would be CPF funds. The management would become the responsibility of the town. I know that the committee that manages the Park District budget for the 3 organizations, they wouldn't be equipped to manage that property. That committee has enough on its plate right now as volunteers. Okay?
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
All right, any other questions about that? All right. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
All right, you guys ready to go over the draft agenda? Packet's getting thicker. Not too bad. All right, we'll try to do this quickly. This is our review of the agenda for the October 27th meeting. This will be an evening meeting held next Tuesday here in this room. People are welcome to attend. We have limited seating. We have barely had occasion where we've had every seat full, so people can stop by. If it turns out there's too many people, you might have to wait, but we'll certainly make provisions for you to be able to make your comments known to the town board. All right, so let's see. We have 5 public hearings. First one considers the acquisition of lands of Hampton Valley Associate in East Quogue, amends the CPF program, management and stewardship plan. Second one is to consider the acquisition of lands of Riser Trust in Noyak.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yeah.
On that one will need to be adjourned. It was advertised quite a while ago. We have an issue that will not be resolved by Tuesday, so I'm going to have to ask you to put it over.
We're going to hold the hearing open or not have the hearing at all?
Well, you don't need to have the hearing at all at this point, but it's already been advertised.
It's already been advertised? All right, because it's,
So I think you have to open it.
Just open it.
okay, thank
I
you.
won't be making any presentation.
All right, so that's on Riser Trust.
In the future at all?
No, just on Tuesday.
Okay, do you have a time, date?
There'll be another public hearing at a future date, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes, I would put it over for a month,
Okay,
for, into the next first,
so we'll adjourn it for a month. That's fine. The third public hearing regarding property maintenance and maintenance conditions at 215 Long Neck Boulevard in Flanders. Fourth is on the public hearing on the 2021 preliminary budget. And the fifth public hearing is to consider any increases proposed in the maximum amount to be expended annually in the town of Southampton's special districts. All right, any questions on public hearings? All right, let's go to resolutions. Julie, you want to read the first?
Town Board Resolution ID 35016, authorization for supervisor to sign 2020 Community Services Grant Agreement with East Quogue Chamber of Commerce for Main Street and Village Green revitalization plans.
Second. Take it.
Was that?
We good?
Yeah, no, yeah, we're just reading them,
Correct.
so we're not actually passing them today. Right? The 35020, authorized crime scene training from Searchy Acquisition Company, LLC, for fingerprint labs.
Town Board Resolution 34995, authorize purchase and installation of driving range perimeter fence from the Suffolk County contract with Residential Fences Corp.
Keep going, Rick.
Yep. Town Board Resolution 35032, authorize the supervisor to sign contract extension for repair and install sidewalks with the Long Island Mason and Concrete. Resolution 35033, authorize the supervisor to sign a contract extension with Suffolk Paving Corp. For furnish and install asphalt concrete.
Town Board Resolution ID 35031, co-sponsored with Councilman Martell, to authorize the supervisor to sign contract extensions with Bilo Industries Incorporated, Grade A Petroleum, and Miles Petroleum Incorporated for oils, lubricants, and grease.
Town Board Resolution 35029, authorize the supervisor to sign a contract extension for street sweeper parts and gutter brooms with Lacal Equipment Incorporated, Malvisi Equipment Company Incorporated, Old Dominion Brush Company, Vasco Systems, and Northeast Sweepers and Rentals. Town Board Resolution 35025, authorize the supervisor to sign contract extensions to furnish and deliver assorted aggregates and soil materials with Bistrian Materials Incorporated, Southampton Excavation and Site Development, and Venomax. Town Board Resolution 34950, authorize the supervisor to sign contract extension for utility test vehicles with Motorcycle Mall Incorporated.
Town Board Resolution ID 35017, authorize the supervisor to sign contract amendment with Suffolk County Office for the Aging to receive additional funding for the Senior Citizen Nutrition Program.
Town Board Resolution ID 35021, authorize the supervisor to sign a contract extension or extensions for embroidered and silk screen clothing with J&G Awards and Sports and New York State Industries for the Disabled Corporation.
35023, authorizes the supervisor to sign a 2021 village agreement for home improvement inspection services. That's for Quogue, Village of Quogue. 35022, authorizes the supervisor to execute a 2021 cooperative agreement with neighboring villages for the town to provide fire inspection services. 35026, authorizes the supervisor to execute 2021 cooperative agreement with neighboring villages for the town to provide shared computer services.
Town Board Resolution 35018, authorize the supervisor to execute a 2021 contract extension with Mariners Cove Marine as the sole source provider to supply the town with Easy Dock parts as the Eastern Long Island authorized dealer.
34956, authorizes the supervisor to execute a contract extension with J&V Auto Salvage, Inc. for removal of abandoned junk and decommissioned vehicles.
Town Board Resolution 35011, authorize the supervisor to execute amendments to stenographer contracts for Justice Court and authorize the supervisor to execute new stenographer contracts for Justice Court. Town Board Resolution 35024, authorize the supervisor to sign a contract extension for bituminous concrete and bituminous materials with East Island Asphalt Corp.
Town Board Resolution ID 34951, authorizes the supervisor to sign a contract extension for public bathroom cleaning with Winston George, DB, also doing business as Winston Cleaning.
Town Board Resolution 34949, authorizes the supervisor to sign contract extension for portable toilets.
Town Board, I'm sorry.
You're right, 35.
Town Board Resolution ID 35034, award and authorize the supervisor to sign a contract for demolition at 34 East Diana Road, Hampton Bays with Brian V. Klug Landscaper Incorporated.
Town Board Resolution 35036, declare items as surplus items.
That's a copier. All right, 35013, recall and amend Town Board Resolution 2020-832, contract with Dominion Construction Corporation.
Town Board Resolution ID 34953, reject bids for demolition at 20 Larbert Road, Hampton Bays.
34836, amends the 2020 adopted budget for Poxabog Golf Course. 35009, amends 2020 budget for various departments. 34852, authorizes the town of Southampton to remove excessive overgrowth of vegetation and conditions in violation of the town code at the premises located at 215 Long Neck Boulevard, Flanders, New York.
Resolution ID 35010, designate parking spaces for military and veterans.
35035, rescinds part of Resolution 2013-1226 to authorize the sale of development rights within the Southampton School District. Julie, just rewinding for a second, the parking spaces for military, I saw the signage. Do we have a list of where the spaces are?
Yes, we do. It's right here within the resolutions. Southampton Town Hall, Bridgehampton Municipal Parking
But
Lot.
like where at the properties?
Oh, Tom Neely was selecting the exact spaces, so I don't know exactly where, but I can find
And
out.
there'll be one space at each?
One space at each of these 5 locations.
Okay, and it just say park, space reserved for military and
and
veterans.
Correct,
Okay, active military and veterans, or,
yes.
okay. All right, 34913, 34913 appoints Evan Cortese to Maintenance Mechanic 1 position in Municipal Works. Tommy John, you're next.
Oh,
Sorry.
34982, authorize firefighter 1, Shane Sharkey to attend the New York State Fire Academy training, Introduction to Fire Investigation, November 16th through November 20th, 2020, in Montour Falls, New York.
Town Board Resolution ID 35015, to authorize the Assistant Town Engineer to attend the Ground Penetrating Radar Survey Training in Nashua, New Hampshire, November 10th through the 13th.
35001, notice of public hearing on the acquisition of lands of Devonshire Associates LLC, estate of Florence S. Kin, and Far Pond Investments LLC, Shinnecock Hills, and amends the CPF Management and Stewardship Plan to include those properties.
Town Board Resolution ID 34981, road review application for 14 Fairway Realty LLC, Suffolk County Tax Map 0900-021.00-01.00-011.001, Situate in Noyak, is accepted. Town Board Resolution ID 35006, road review application for Big Mike Landing LLC, Suffolk County Tax Map 0900-079.00-01.00-057.010 at Situate at North Sea, is accepted. Town Board Resolution ID 34980, road review application for Kirk Warner, Suffolk County Tax Map 0900-076.00-05.00-015.000, situated at North Sea, is accepted. Town Board Resolution ID 35003, road review application for Mark House Developers LLC, Suffolk County Tax Map 0900-079.00-01.00-057.008, Situate at North Sea, is accepted. if there's one more. Town Board Resolution ID 35005, road review application for Westbury Home Developers LLC, Suffolk County Tax Map 0900-079.00-01.00-056.009, situated North Sea, is accepted.
All right, and there's one more separate from that packet to be added into the packet. This is 35014. Accepts grant award from New York State EFC Wastewater Infrastructure Engineering Planning Grant Program for the preparation of an STP engineering report within the Hampton Bays Downtown Overlay District. All right, any questions about the draft agenda? Hearing none. Sunday, go ahead, let's publish it. All right, updates. I don't have much this week. I continue to follow the numbers. We continue, the town of Southampton, typically it's about on average, around 2 cases a day within the township. I don't know what our population is, 60,000 by census, but probably double that in reality. And in the East End, our numbers are still, we'd expect to be 10% of the cases for Suffolk County. We're about 5% of the cases for Suffolk County, sometimes less. So we're, less than the Western Suffolk. But COVID is still here. As I say, coughing, don't worry. We consider we continue to enforce all the COVID restrictions and regulations. Other than that, a couple other minor things. Excuse me, Election Day is approaching. Early voting begins on Saturday, October 24th. Our location will be at Stony Brook Southampton campus in the old gym. If you want to vote by absentee ballot, they must be postmarked by Election Day. And people should try to get them in earlier if possible, obviously. You can still request an absentee ballot through Tuesday, October 27th. And we have information on the town's website as well regarding that. Drug Take-Back Day is this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at 2 locations, at the Hampton Bays Community Center on Ponquag Avenue and at the police substation at the Bridgehampton Commons. It's an opportunity to clean out your old medicines and get rid of them properly. So take advantage of that if you have expired medicines in your cabinet. Other than that, I don't have any other updates. Let's do a quick go-around. If there's anything, any announcements or any reports from any CACs, this is the time. Julie, we'll start with you.
Sure. I had a CAC meeting last Thursday. Some of the things that we discussed were some traffic issues and speeding that East Quogue is dealing with. We've had conversations with Tom Neely and Chief Skornicki, and I'm sure that we're going to continue on with those. Another thing that they have concerns about are numerous dead trees along Main Street. I know that one of the community members is meeting with an arborist to get some better numbers. We're hoping that maybe the county will help us take down the dead trees and with some of the grant money that they're getting to replace them. Some of them look really dead, but I'm not an arborist, so we're going to get some confirmation of how many may need to be replaced and hopefully spruce up Main Street in East Quogue. And that's all I have today.
Thank you. Debbie Jo?
The early voting that you mentioned, Jay, it starts on October 21st, November 1st. Very important. On the weekends, the hours are 10 a.m. to 3, and then during the week, the hours are kind of staggered. So make sure you check the hours. Please vote. It's over at Southampton College, but you can vote at any location in Suffolk County, any early voting location. So if you find yourself up in Southold, you could drive in and vote. Your vote will be counted there as well, and vice versa. In Bridgehampton, the brick walkway is underway. That is getting built, looks good, very happy over there. And also, with our fire departments and fire district, we had our LoSAP training meetings, and that's something that this board is going to be considering, how many LoSAP points we want to consider giving to ambulance district workers who may not have accrued LoSAP hours because of the pandemic, and we will fill you in on that as well. Last night, we had a youth and government meeting. It's something that I do through the Youth Bureau, and it was well attended, and I'm happy to say that one of our students was selected as Commissioner of Education in the state. This is an organization with about 750 kids. They choose about 16 kids to be in the governor's cabinet, and Aiden Genender was selected as Secretary of Education, so well done, Aiden. Also, East Hampton had a meeting about their airport, and they reported that their air traffic is up 80% in October from 2019 to 2020 as well. So that's something that we're looking at. We're seeing an uptick in jet traffic, and I know that's an issue in West Hampton as well. So we're looking to quantify some of that activity.
Do you think it's like an individual hiring a jet, or a bunch of people get together and rent out a jet to come back and forth, or nobody knows yet?
Well, there are private jets that individuals have. I do not have one. But they're large jets, and if somebody charters a jet, then it seems like they go ahead and then schedule other people to ride in that jet as well. And some of them are quite big. When you start to look at the jets with the 2 engines on it, and 7 or 8 windows on either side, that's significant, and it's a lot of disruption, especially when they're taken off. You're getting a several ton piece of metal in the air, and that takes some thrust. So.
I'm seeing something I've never seen before, are ads on television for services from Manhattan to the Hamptons.
There we go.
I've never seen those. So, that's kind of an indicator of what's going on.
Yeah,
And I have nothing, by
I
the
think
way.
the price point is probably more affordable now to people, some of those services. It's interesting, but jet traffic is up. In those October numbers, that's interesting. It could be that, the pandemic issue, that it's just a lot more people working out of their homes here rather than, these people normally would be in New York, potentially this time of year.
And there's
They
a
wouldn't-
significant amount of commuting going on by air.
These homes were basically summer homes. Now they're being used in the fall.
Yeah, and we're seeing that with sort of the broadening use of our bandwidth in the internet services, so
So
that you would expect that if you had a lot of people working from home.
Right, exactly. So we're seeing this extended season, these individuals who normally just summer here are using those properties more. Maybe their family is here and somebody's going to New York and going back and forth. I don't really know, but you're probably starting with a pretty low base. The October traffic last year was probably pretty low. So to see a doubling of it is somewhat surprising, but it sounds explainable.
Right, the high season would typically be in the summertime, and that's what East Hampton looks at, the period between June and September. And October, there's generally a drop-off, but of course, we know people are staying out here.
And that increases in jet traffic or helicopter as well?
General incoming and outgoing flights, that's helicopter, fixed wing as well.
Rick, Evan?
Yeah, Councilwoman Lofstead and I and Tom Neely are finishing up our recommendations we'll be bringing to the board, I believe, next work session for our road ends and parking permits for 2021. We just about have our recommendations finished.
Cool.
Okay, good. Anything else? All right. All right, so we Next up is just executive session, so we have acquisitions to talk about and personnel to talk about. So I'll make a motion to end our work session and go into executive session on those items.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Scavone. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned for all the purposes.